Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you today, February 28th. It's approximately 11 o'clock at night, and I want to talk to you about some breaking news, an interesting series of news events. We are seeing more and more often that activists are getting involved in politics. Now, I don't mean protests, we've seen that, but I mean running for elected office. And the question is that worthwhile? And why is it happening? I know it's an interesting topic. Some people may be thinking I'm talking about the election in Chicago, but actually there may be more to it than just that. But before we get started, let me first mention, if this is the first time you're seeing our channel, we welcome you. We thank you for being part of our audience. We want you to know that we do long-form political commentary, and every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you. We reach out across the internet to hear your voices in chats and tweets and phone calls to tell us what you think is important and affecting the world. Anywhere from across the globe, we look to hear your voices to tell us what is important because we believe in the First Amendment. We believe in your right to be able to speak about the issues that affect us all. So we hope you will join us this Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Moving on to the issue at hand. I know many people may be talking about the breaking news that just came out, and that is, of course, that Chicago Mayor, or former Chicago Mayor, Lori Lightfoot, lost her election. She is no longer going to be the mayor of Chicago. First time in 40 years that a mayor for Chicago, all Democrats, lost a re-election. There are many, many reasons for that. One of the biggest reasons is, of course, that Lori Lightfoot is an activist. She is looking to promote her political ideology above the needs of the people in Chicago. That has been expressed many times, whether Lori Lightfoot was denying interviews from anyone except black reporters, to her many thoughts about bail reform and releasing criminals onto the streets, making them a greater danger to the people and residents of Chicago. But that's not who I want to talk about today. Not just because she lost her re-election, but I think there's a better example of what I'm talking about activists, not just protesting, but in elected office. And this happened in my own corner of New York. And that is that Mayor Matt Ryan, former Binghamton Mayor Matt Ryan is now seeking re-election. And I want to be upfront about this. I know Mayor Matt Ryan. I've known him since about 2009. And I have a rocky relationship with him, to say the least. And I want to be very upfront about that I do have a political bias here. Just so you know. And I do not support Mayor Matt Ryan, or again, I should say, former Mayor Matt Ryan, in his latest endeavor. But in hearing the announcement this evening that Matt Ryan is looking to run for the Broome County DA's race, it made me wonder about the question of political activists, individuals who are running for an elected office not for the betterment of the people, but for a political agenda, a political ideology, something that we are seeing over and over again. Now, I do want to be fair about this, so I want to cover this properly. Matt Ryan is an activist. There is no question about it. He has always been an activist, at least since he was about 20. This is confirmed. WNBF recently spoke about and even got a quote from Matt Ryan. At 20 years of age, Matt Ryan was arrested along with 50 other individuals for protesting the Vietnam War. Even at the age of 20, Matt Ryan was an activist. He had a political agenda, a political ideology that he would go out and protest about. Now, this is not to say that is a good thing or a bad thing, but it is a history that we have seen with Matt Ryan. Now, after that fact, roughly 30 years later, Matt Ryan would go on to become the mayor of Binghamton, New York, located in the southern tier of New York, about 15 minutes away from the Pennsylvania border. And Matt Ryan is known for two major events. The first being Well, a very sad reason, which is there was a shooting, a mass shooting in the city of Binghamton in 2009. That was in April. And sadly, 13 individuals lost their lives. It was a senseless event, and it caught national headlines. The city of Binghamton became another city across this nation that had experienced a mass shooting. And that's when I got to meet and first be introduced to Mayor Matt Ryan at that time. He did the best that he could in that situation. I don't know how he could have done better. I don't know how any mayor does better when confronted with senseless murder. And to his credit, Mayor Matt Ryan rose to the occasion as best he could. And the other thing that Matt Ryan was known for during his time, or at least widely known across the nation, that he was known for was also, of course, the fact that he spent $6,000 of taxpayer money to get a cost of war sign put up in front of City Hall. This was to protest the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. Okay, so once again we see Mayor Ryan is known for his activism. He was active in 1972 against the Vietnam War. He was active again in protesting the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, spending taxpayer dollars to promote his political ideology. And in every case, in every example that can be found, Mayor Ryan has been an advocate and an activist for the far left, not just Democrats, but the progressive movement overall. We've seen this over and over again. In fact, we have done many interviews, or I should say several interviews, with Matt Ryan over the years, including an interview on October 15th of 2011 talking about gun control. Matt Ryan is not an advocate of guns, of firearms, of the Second Amendment. He does wish to restrict that from the public, in part because of his experience with the mass shooting, but also in part because he's an activist, and he is a progressive, and he does not agree with Americans widely having the ability to own firearms, which is kind of shocking when you consider that upstate New York is one of the largest areas of individuals that own firearms in New York State. It's somewhat amazing. Mayor Matt Ryan thinks that in stopping and restricting law-abiding citizens from being able to own a firearm, that would reduce gun crime and mass shootings, something that has not been proven to be correct ever. In the history of the United States, over the last 5 decades, there has been no example of a gun control law that has stopped criminals or the criminally deranged from enacting senseless violence. That's just a fact. And there is no evidence to counter that. But it didn't end there, because Matt Ryan is known for more than just his view on the Second Amendment, more than just his cost of war sign, his protests against the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, more than just the senseless murders at the American Civic Association. He's also known for his activism while in office. All of this is while he is in office. And he's known for his activism with the Occupy Binghamton protest, something that many people may have forgotten about. This is back in 2011, where Mayor Matt Ryan was not just willing to allow individuals to occupy city property at a risk to the citizens of Binghamton, New York, but he actually was active in supporting, going down to support the protesters, to be among them as they protested, well, nobody really knows what, during that protest, during the Occupy movement across the United States. But he also allowed them to occupy, to take over and control city property without a permit, without any reason, and to allow them to do that for weeks on end, actually months on end, something that was a liability to the city of Binghamton. If even one of these individuals had ever questioned, said that anything happened to them, any crime, any injury, it would have been a lawsuit of millions of dollars. In fact, it was a violation of 3 separate codes, laws, and regulations for the city of Binghamton. But Matt Ryan didn't care because it was about activism. And we did, in fact, cover during the time some of the things happening about the Occupy Binghamton movement. In fact, from our old website, which is the mboss.com website, back on October 16th, a day after the protests had started, we did speak with many people at the event. We went down and talked to them. We have a video about that. And we also noted that the Occupy Binghamton movement, what was the cause and what is the remedy? What were they looking to do? The Occupy Binghamton movement did not bring back any businesses that had been lost in recent flooding in the region. It did not improve the quality of education, nor broaden the number of those who sought higher education. It did not reduce or even slow down the number of those that were in foreclosure. It didn't bring the price of a single good or item sold in the city of Binghamton or Broome County, did not reduce the cost. It didn't give a reason for entrepreneurs and small business owners to either start a business or expand a business in downtown Binghamton. In fact, the Occupy Binghamton movement and the fact that it was supported by a sitting mayor and the violations of actual laws of the city of Binghamton may have dissuaded many entrepreneurs and small business owners from coming to Binghamton or expanding their businesses here. So this is what political activism often brings us. While the individual, if elected, they often will promote their ideology, pushing it onto the residents, whether the residents of the city agree with it or not. And while, as an example with the Occupy Binghamton movement, while 175 people were willing to come down at various parts, and that number diminished over time, but they were willing to come out and say they were angry and upset about life in general, that isn't a city of 40,000 people or the over 100,000 people in the surrounding region that do business in the hub of the city of Binghamton. It wasn't a fair reflection of the mood or the mentality of the general populace. In fact, most people were against the Occupy Binghamton movement because it served no purpose. It had no end goal. And anyone researching that will be able to find it. And you'll be able to see the links and the description below to review that for yourself. So that brings us to a question. What is this activism doing? Including the activism as we covered when Mayor Matt Ryan, this was about 10 years ago in January of 2013, when Matt Ryan was was in favor of gun control, and he was part of a national movement of mayors to try and remove the ability of law-abiding citizens to be able to own firearms. So again, we see this over and over again. Activists, when elected to an office, much like Lori Lightfoot, much like Governor Newsom, much like the disgraced former mayor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, and now the governor, Kathy Hochul, when they place their political ideology ahead of the people, what as a result normally is many losses to the people. Losses in opportunity, losses in funding for the government, loss of a respect or a confidence in our government to represent us and to do what is best for the people. Now, as a caveat, I must say, Matt Ryan is a believer. He believes in the issues that he promotes. He believes in his advocacy of these progressive ideals. He believes that he is doing the right thing and that at the end of the day, this will promote the best for everyone. I will not take that away from him. He believes in what he is doing. But objectively, what he is doing isn't what the majority of people want, nor has it been proven to be an effective solution for the people over and over again. The increases in gun control do not make people safe. They never have. There is no example where that has been the case anywhere in the United States over the last 50 years. That's just a fact. The Occupy movement did not benefit anyone. In fact, it led to many people across the nation in New York and not in Binghamton, but in New York City and across the nation, led to many lawsuits for cities because of individuals that suffered sexual assaults, regular assaults, and other violations of law. And it achieved zero. It achieved nothing because there was no goal. It was just a statement of activists saying that they were upset with their lives and they wanted more. They desired more. Not that they worked for more, not that they earned more. They just wanted to be given more. It was the beginning of the entitlement movement. And we saw that in 2011. Looking at the activism and thinking about it. Another case, looking at the clock of war, the protests against Iraq and Afghanistan by a sitting member of government, an individual who did not have the widespread support of the city of Binghamton or the larger Broome County region, something that was a waste of $6,000 of the public's money to promote his political viewpoint, his political ideology. Did it achieve anything? Well, no. The Iraq War did not end. The war in Afghanistan did not end. He got some news, national news. He got some bonus points with the Democratic Party and progressive movements throughout the region. He solidified his position as a political figure in the area, but he achieved nothing. The public lost $6,000 and nothing happened. Now, some would say a political movement is its own reward to make the public aware, which we do not deny nor do we take away from. Except when you're using public funds to push that message, that's something else. That's an abuse of power, we believe on this channel. To use the public's money to push an agenda that the public does not support is a waste of funds and an abuse of power. Matt Ryan would disagree with this. Many of the progressives in the region would disagree. They are a minority of the population, both in terms of their voting and in terms of their wider acceptance within the region. But we find often and continuously that these activists have a dark side to them. Not just the abuse of power as I have identified, but their other activities. Mayor Matt Ryan is no exception to that rule. It was in 2014 that Matt Ryan, who is also against fracking, got into a bar fight with an individual who has been on this program before, Victor Furman, an individual we've spoken to and we have covered on this channel. He even calls in occasionally. Victor Furman got into a fight with ex-mayor Matt Ryan because of fracking, because they have different views. And Matt Ryan is an activist that strongly believed that fracking was against the best interest of the public. You may or may not agree with hydrofracking. It is an effective tool. It's been around since 1940. It is one of the reasons why the United States is able to have a huge, in fact, the world's largest natural gas reserves, and that has enabled us to be able to meet many of our energy needs and also provides a large sum of money for individuals and businesses throughout all of the northeastern United States. But it is an example of the extremes that activists will go to when they disagree with an individual, to be extreme in that disagreement. Now, that's not to say that Mr. Furman in that situation was without fault. I'm sure both were at fault. But we would expect that a former mayor, a prominent political figure, would have a better temperament and to not engage in such actions. But this is the norm for Matt Ryan, as it is the norm for many extremist activists that we have seen. To be fair and to be honest, Matt Ryan has had several incidents, let's call that, with myself. In our private lives, there have been several incidents where Matt Ryan has been unruly at the least, objectionable at the more accurate, in having conversations with me in our private lives. That should be unacceptable for someone who is a public figure and very, very connected to politics in the region. But even with those problems, even with those extremes, Matt Ryan continued to move forward in his political agenda. He used his activism and his former fame as an ex-mayor, as a political activist that had been elected, to try and seek additional elected offices. In fact, he sought the position of Broome County Sheriff. Now, Matt Ryan has never been a police officer or a member of law enforcement. He has worked as a lawyer, so he does have that experience in the legal system, but he has no law enforcement experience. In fact, during his time as mayor of Binghamton, he reduced the amount of police officers in the city of Binghamton. In fact, Mayor Matt Ryan was one of the first to actually enact defunding the police, with a result very similar to what we have seen in every other example of defunding the police. The public was less served. But yet, an individual who actively reduced the number of police in a city, left the people less served, less protected, sought out a position as a county sheriff. This was something that we thought was ineffective at the best, and activist political grandstanding at the worst. And it was a reflection that the Democratic Party in the southern tier of New York had no other option. They had no legitimate and worthwhile candidate, and so Matt Ryan was the best thing they could offer. And I think Matt Ryan understood that, because even as has been reported since by other news media, Matt Ryan didn't take this very seriously. He wasn't actively trying to actually get elected. Instead, he was trying to promote his agenda, social justice, a political far-left ideology, a progressive ideology. That was his goal, to emphasize to the public that social justice was necessary. It was important and needed. And one of the things he wanted to do is remove bail and have bail reform, amongst other objectives that many of the progressives wanted as well. That resulted in Mayor Matt Ryan receiving 23% of the vote. The public rejected him, to be exact, and this was reported on November 7th of 2018. Former Mayor Matt Ryan lost 77% to his 23%. In other words, it was a blowout election. Now, this is important, and we see this very often for many activists. At any given election, this is a absolute rule, and it's no surprise to anyone who follows politics. 20% of any political party always vote straight down the line. 20% of Democrats vote straight down the line Democrat. 20% of Republicans vote straight down the line Republican. This is assumed, and it is consistent in everywhere across this nation. And thus, anyone running for any elected office is essentially guaranteed about 20% of all the votes every single time, plus minus 1 or 2%. It is just a fact. Matt Ryan wound up with 23%. And to be very generous, that would mean that 3% additional individuals voted for him beyond the 20% that is absolutely given. It would tell us that the public made it very clear they had no interest in an activist in political office, having experienced an activist in political office already, having seen the example of what Mayor Matt Ryan did while in office in defunding the police, in using public funds to promote his political ideology, and endangering the city by leaving it open to lawsuit, in promoting Occupy Binghamton, to see some of the spending that he did under his time in office that many people find to be quite questionable, roundabouts and beautification and other issues. That's not to say that Mayor Matt Ryan doesn't have his advocates, have individuals that support him or believe in him. It is to say, though, that he is well connected and understood to to be the same activist that he was in 1972 against the Vietnam War as he was as mayor and since that time. And he has followed the same kind of route we have seen for many of the activists, like Lori Lightfoot, that very often they will go to such an extreme that the public will reject them wholesale. I think it's also important to mention that while the southern tier of New York is best described as a purple district, a purple region, we have seen that upstate New York is predominantly, more or less, a Republican or red region, as opposed to the major cities like New York, Rochester, Syracuse, and others. It should be noted that since that time, since 2018, when former Mayor Matt Ryan went out and ran for the Broome County Sheriff, he has been relatively quiet. Matt has been very active still in the political sphere, in his activism. And that came to a culmination, something most visibly seen by most people in the region, when he was arrested this year, 2023. In fact, it was on February 2nd, or reported on February 2nd, that Mayor Matt Ryan was arrested in a protest being run by the Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow, also known as PLOT, a far-left extremist organization that was responsible, its members have been responsible, for disrupting the public multiple events and being arrested at multiple events, especially its presumed leader, Messiah Andrews, who has been arrested not only for disrupting parades in Binghamton, but also second-degree rioting in Rochester, New York. Matt Ryan was aware of their intention to go, in February, to go down to a private business, Wegmans, a supermarket, and to protest in front of that, or on the grounds of that supermarket. Now, this is important to understand, and I want to be very clear. Matt Ryan, a lawyer, was aware that this was a crime. To go onto private property without any permission, to conduct a protest during regular business operations, that's trespassing. And Mayor Ryan was aware of this before the event actually happened. He did not notify any member of law enforcement. Instead, he decided that he would be a legal observer. But we believe that this is a violation of his oath as a member of the court, being aware of a crime before its commission and not informing law enforcement. In fact, Mayor Ryan instead went and watched the event, quote unquote, and as you can see, he stated at the time, and this is according to Spectrum News, he stated that a lot of people protest by police stations and no one cares, and no one comes. Well, let's be clear. Police stations are public property. They are owned by cities and states and the federal government. They are not private property. That's public property. So no one would protest that, as it is a public square. Matt Ryan goes on, and he knows this, both because of his position in political office and as well as a lawyer, as well as an activist. But he wants to change the mindset of the public to make it seem like this is normal. It isn't. He goes on to say, quote, "Here you have an audience that is listening, and it's already generated a lot of conversation in the community." So his answer about why he was involved with a crime that he knew would be happening was because there's an audience, that it's okay for individuals to impose themselves on the general public, on private property, because they could hear what the protesters want to say. That's not very fair. That's not free speech. Some would call that coercion, forcing individuals to do something that is against their own will. Also, a crime. Again, something that a lawyer would know about. But he is an activist. And in his activism, he wanted to promote this even at the cost of the freedom of the public, even at the free will of the public, even at the expenditure, the destruction of rights of that private business and its private property. And when those protesters, the progressive leaders of tomorrow, otherwise known as PLOT, a far-left extremist organization that routinely goes to events to impose their will on the public and get arrested, they did get arrested. Rather than, as was offered to them, the opportunity to move to a location that would allow them to publicly protest, they instead wanted to be arrested. And Matt Ryan was arrested along with them because he refused to leave the private property, as that property had requested everyone to leave the location. In fact, we know that Matt Ryan wasn't necessarily there as just an innocent observer. Besides the fact that he was aware of the crime prior to its commission, we also know, as was reported by the WSKG reporter Van Golden, that Matt Ryan was engaged in verbal altercations with individuals in the parking lot of that event. Now, that's not to say that Matt Ryan was in a physical altercation. That did not happen. And so he didn't violate the law in that respect, but yet, as a legal observer, he seemed to have crossed the line from observing what was happening to actually attacking individuals, as he would later discuss on WNBF, that he was verbally cursing out and assaulting another individual because that member of the public was upset that this illegal protest was happening because they did not agree with the subject matter of the progressive leaders of tomorrow. And so Mayor Matt Ryan, in his advocacy, verbally assaulted a woman for voicing her public dislike of what was happening, of that violation of law that was occurring in front of her. That doesn't sound like a legal observer there to watch and see what is happening and make sure laws were not broken. That sounds like someone who is intimately involved with the advocacy and activism. That is an activist. He is trying to change minds, and as he would later say on WNBF in an interview about this event, he would describe that he in fact was, or at least he describes it as changing a woman's mind about what she was observing, the crime that was being committed in front of her eyes. That's activism. That's advocacy. That is not a neutral observer of an event, of a criminal event that he knew of beforehand. These are all things that we see that happen because of activists. This is what happens when we have activists involved. And we have covered this in greater detail, as you can see, and that was on February 1st, where we were discussing the entire event. So you can see that for yourself and to see our coverage at that time. That brings us to what we are seeing today. It's being reported that Matt Ryan plans to run on a criminal justice reform agenda. That is exactly the same thing that Mayor Matt Ryan ran on when he was going for county sheriff, something that was rejected by the entire Southern Tier Broome County region. It is a fringe, partisan, extremist point of view. It is a goal that only the extremists actually share. But Matt Ryan believes that this is something that he should push forward: bail reform and changes of social justice. This is highly activist and partisan. This is a progressive agenda. Let's think about what Matt Ryan is looking to promote. He wants to promote bail reform, something that has been reported back on September 22nd of 2022 from cityjournal.org, that it has actually actively increased the amount of crime in New York State. Bail reform, just like in Chicago, has actually endangered the public, not removed the danger from them. And I quote, New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services quietly dropped a bombshell. For months, the state has avoided releasing much needed data on individuals who are arraigned in New York before lawmakers passed bail reform. But newly available data confirm what critics have long argued. bail reform was followed by a significant increase in criminal reoffering. Criminals are creating more crime because of bail reform than not. And we have heard from the activists over and over again that if we just had bail reform because of social justice, because black people are somehow unfairly treated, that the system, it's systemically against them, well, in releasing them, the data has shown that they reoffend more often, that crime is increasing, and that this has endangered the public more than not. The entire concept of bail reform has failed. Now, I should mention something else that I think is important. I skipped over it. I want to come back to it. Initially, Mayor Matt Ryan was arrested for trespassing, and he was arrested for resisting arrest. The resisting arrest was later dropped. He still did get arrested. I want to be fair, and that article is also available. But the key points that Mayor Ryan is looking to promote, that progressives will protect and take care of minorities. That minorities are incapable of going through the legal system, going through the political system, and to effectively make their own cases. Instead, he will be a champion for them and to force that onto the people. This is somewhat upsetting. But the question remains, what would we expect when activists are put in place, when they do get into elected office? Well, we've seen what happens when Matt Ryan was mayor. Defunding of the police, wasting of the public's funding. We have seen that the public will be bullied, and we've seen several events of that in his private life. But we also see examples of what's going to happen, as we have seen with both Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot, but also in the case of what happened most recently in September of 2022, when a judge validated Governor DeSantis of Florida in firing a prosecutor who had made it very clear he would not follow the law as it is stated. In fact, it was Andrew Warren, a prosecutor for the state of Florida, had signed documents stating that he would not follow the law, that he would not prosecute the law because of his political activism, his belief in social justice. Again, we know that Matt Ryan has already made it clear he is a social justice warrior. He was a social justice warrior in 2018 when he ran for the Broome County Sheriff. He is a social justice warrior today, as he stated that he is again looking to promote social justice, criminal justice reform, something that is not accepted or widely promoted throughout New York State, and especially in upstate New York, where greater crime has been the net result. So I walked through all of this to try and make it clear, given that I have a personal bias. And I am sure that there are elements of this that some individuals will disagree with, that they have a different point of view about, or maybe that they support, and that's all fine. But I believe what we see across this nation, as an example with Lori Lightfoot, as an example as we have seen with the Broome County Sheriff's race in 2018, as we have seen in Florida in 2022, the public do not want activists in elected office more and more. They do not want someone to promote their political ideology, forcing it onto the general public and using public tax dollars to pay for that. And that it has been over and over not the most effective political solution to the problems that face our nation. I believe that Matt Ryan is an example. And because he's had national fame before, he may well be a great example on the smaller scale, not the national level of, say, the Chicago mayor, maybe not the example of a Florida governor looking to run for president, but on a more common, average American view of a small city throughout this nation, where we are seeing these political activists seek elected office. It is a warning. It is something that we should be aware of. Now, Matt has, various times throughout the years that I have known him, disagreed with many of the things that I have said on this channel. That's his purview and that's his opinion, and that's fantastic. We have said before, and we continue to say today, that if Matt disagrees with anything that we have said, if anything he believes is not factual, as we have provided evidence for, then we are more than open to providing him with an interview where he can explain himself. If he would like to explain how criminal justice reform, bail reform, will benefit the southern tier of New York, we would be happy to hear his argument about that versus the factual data that it is not helping New York State. That doesn't mean they're not the best person in that election. They may well be. Often they are not. They may be well liked, depending on which region of the nation they may be in. But they should be under higher levels of scrutiny, because very often what we will see is a repeated history of violating laws, of pushing an agenda, of forcing upon the public ideologies that the public do not share. And as a result, negative consequences for that community over the time span that that individual, if they get into elected office, their time there. But maybe you disagree. Maybe you think an activist in elected office is just what this nation needs. Maybe you have evidence of that. I would look forward to seeing that. As always, we thank you for taking the time to be with us today, and we look forward to hearing your comments. Hope to see you on Sunday. Thank you.